Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today we're diving into a topic that's a little bit different from our usual fare. Because today we're talking about places Canadians might want to avoid in 2024. While Canada generally enjoys positive relations with most countries, there are indeed some nations where Canadians may face challenges when it comes to entry or staying for extended periods. These restrictions can arise due to a variety of factors, including political disagreements, strict visa policies, or security concerns. So, before you book your next big adventure, let's take a closer look at 10 countries where Canadians might encounter some difficulties in 2024. And remember, this isn't about judging any of these countries, it's about staying safe and respecting the complexities of international relations. Let's get started. First up, we have North Korea, often described as the Hermit Kingdom. North Korea operates under a highly restrictive regime, permitting only a limited number of visitors each year, all under heavily controlled conditions. Think carefully curated tours and constant supervision. Canadians, like most Westerners, face significant restrictions when it comes to North Korea. This is largely due to ongoing political tensions between North Korea and much of the Western world. The nuclear program, the human rights record, these are all points of major contention. Unfortunately, these tensions translate into strict entry controls for Canadians. Getting a visa to North Korea is notoriously difficult, often requiring letters of invitation, detailed itineraries, and multiple interviews. It's not impossible, but it's a far cry from booking a quick flight and heading off on a whim. Travel within North Korea is heavily restricted. You can't just wander off and explore on your own. You'll be part of an organized tour, and you'll be expected to stick to the itinerary. There are also strict rules about photography and interacting with locals. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking, isn't that part of the allure, the mystery, the forbidden fruit? And I get it, there's a certain intrigue to places that are off the beaten path, but it's crucial to weigh that intrigue against the potential risks. In North Korea, those risks include the possibility of detention, arbitrary enforcement of laws, and severe limitations on communication with the outside world. Not to mention, the ethical considerations of supporting a regime with such a controversial human rights record. So, while North Korea might seem like an adventurous destination, it's essential to approach it with a healthy dose of caution and awareness. It's a country best admired from afar, at least for the time being. There are plenty of other incredible places to explore in the world where you can experience different cultures, meet new people, and create lasting memories, all without the same level of risk or ethical dilemma. Our next destination takes us to the Middle East, to a country steeped in history and culture, Iran. Iran is home to ancient ruins, stunning mosques, and some of the warmest hospitality you'll find anywhere in the world. But navigating the complexities of traveling to Iran as a Canadian requires a delicate balance. Diplomatic ties between Canada and Iran were severed back in 2012. This wasn't a decision made lightly, it stemmed from a complex web of political disagreements, including Iran's nuclear program and its support for certain groups considered by Canada to be terrorist organizations. Severing diplomatic ties doesn't mean that travel between the two countries is impossible, but it does make it significantly more challenging. For starters, there's the issue of visas. Canadians will need to apply for a visa in advance, and the process can be lengthy and unpredictable. The Canadian government currently advises against all travel to Iran. This advisory is based on the volatile security situation in the region, as well as the risk of arbitrary detention of foreigners. Because of the strained diplomatic relations, Canadians in Iran may find themselves subject to increased scrutiny from authorities. You might be questioned more thoroughly at checkpoints, your belongings might be searched more frequently, and there's always the possibility of being followed or monitored. Iran is a country with a rich history, a vibrant culture, and incredibly welcoming people. But it's crucial to acknowledge and respect the current political climate. Traveling to Iran as a Canadian right now requires a deep understanding of the risks involved, a willingness to navigate a complex bureaucracy, and a certain level of comfort with uncertainty. Always check the latest travel advisories from the Canadian government before even considering a trip to Iran. Stay informed and stay safe. At number 3, Syria, a war-torn reality. Our journey now takes us to Syria, a country tragically embroiled in a devastating civil war for over a decade. The images we see on the news, the stories we hear from refugees, they paint a stark and heartbreaking picture of a nation ripped apart. It's important to remember that behind those headlines, behind those statistics, are real people. Real lives shattered by violence and displacement. Due to the ongoing civil war and the incredibly unstable situation in Syria, the Canadian government, along with many others, strongly advises against all travel to the country. The risks in Syria are immense and multifaceted. There's the ever-present danger of getting caught in the crossfire, of being injured or killed by stray bullets, mortars, or airstrikes. Kidnappings are a serious concern, targeting both locals and foreigners, often for ransom or political leverage. Even if you somehow manage to avoid these immediate dangers, the infrastructure in Syria has been decimated. Traveling to Syria right now isn't just ill-advised, it's incredibly dangerous, and could potentially put an unnecessary strain on already overburdened aid organizations and local communities. Instead of planning a trip to Syria, consider supporting reputable organizations working tirelessly to provide humanitarian aid to those affected by the conflict. Donate, volunteer your time, or simply raise awareness about the plight of the Syrian people. At number 4, Saudi Arabia. A clash of cultures? Let's shift gears a little and head to the Arabian Peninsula, specifically to Saudi Arabia, a country that's been making headlines recently for its ambitious tourism plans. Saudi Arabia is home to breathtaking desert landscapes, ancient cities, and a rich cultural heritage. And in recent years it's made a concerted effort to open its doors to the world. But while Saudi Arabia is eager to welcome tourists, it's essential to remember that it remains a deeply conservative country, one governed by strict Islamic law known as Sharia law. This doesn't mean Canadians can't visit Saudi Arabia. In fact, tourist visas are now readily available. But it does mean that Canadians need to be aware of and respectful of the local customs and laws, which can be vastly different from what we're accustomed to back home. For example, Saudi Arabia has strict rules regarding alcohol. It's completely prohibited. Bringing alcohol into the country or consuming it is a serious offense. There are also strict dress codes, particularly for women, who are expected to dress modestly, covering their hair and body in public. Public displays of affection, even between married couples, are frowned upon, and photography of government buildings, military installations, and even some mosques is strictly prohibited. Failure to abide by these laws and customs can result in severe penalties, including fines, imprisonment, or even deportation. It can be an incredible and eye-opening destination, but it's crucial to go in with your eyes wide open, to do your research, and to be prepared to be respectful and adapt to a very different cultural environment. Pause. 3 sat number 5, Russia, a chilly political climate. Our destination on this somewhat unusual travel guide takes us north to Russia, a vast country spanning 11 time zones, a country of snow-capped mountains, endless forests, and vibrant cities steeped in history and culture. But the political climate between Canada and Russia has grown rather frosty in recent years. This chill is largely due to Canada's stance on Russia's actions in Ukraine, including the annexation of Crimea. Canada, along with many of its allies, has condemned Russia's actions and imposed sanctions. This diplomatic standoff has, unfortunately, spilled over into other areas, including travel. Now, this doesn't mean Canadians can't visit Russia. Tourist visas are still being issued, but it does mean that Canadians should be prepared for a higher level of scrutiny when applying for visas or traveling within Russia. You might be asked more detailed questions about your itinerary, your reasons for visiting, and even your political views. There have also been reports of Canadians experiencing difficulties at border crossings, with some being denied entry without explanation. The takeaway here is that while Russia can be a fascinating and rewarding destination, traveling there as a Canadian right now requires careful consideration. Be prepared for bureaucratic hurdles, increased scrutiny, and a need for heightened awareness of the political sensitivities. At number 6, Venezuela. Our destination takes us to South America, to a country grappling with immense challenges, Venezuela. Once a thriving nation known for its oil reserves and natural beauty, Venezuela has been caught in a downward spiral of economic and political turmoil for years. For Canadians, this instability translates into significant risks. The Canadian government currently advises against all travel to Venezuela, citing the volatile security situation, shortages of basic goods and medical supplies, and the potential for civil unrest. The economic crisis has hit Venezuela particularly hard. Hyperinflation has rendered the local currency practically worthless, and there are widespread shortages of food, medicine, and other essential goods. Imagine traveling to a country where even finding bottled water is a challenge. That's the reality in Venezuela today. Adding to the difficulties, the political climate in Venezuela remains highly polarized. The government, led by President Nicolas Maduro, has faced accusations of corruption, human rights violations, and authoritarianism. This has led to international sanctions and strained diplomatic relations with many countries, including Canada. For Canadians, obtaining a visa to enter Venezuela can be incredibly difficult. The Venezuelan embassy in Canada has been closed for several years, making it nearly impossible to apply for a visa through official channels. Even if you manage to secure a visa, navigating Venezuela as a tourist can be incredibly risky. Crime rates are high, and tourists can be targets for theft, robbery, and even kidnapping. The lack of basic infrastructure and reliable transportation only adds to the challenges. Given these factors, it's easy to see why Venezuela tops the list of countries Canadians should avoid in 2024. The risks are simply too high, and the potential for a negative experience is far too great. At number 7 is China. Our next destination takes us to the world's most populous nation, China. Now, I know China holds a certain allure for many travelers. Its ancient history, vibrant culture, and modern marvels are undeniably captivating. But for Canadians, traveling to China in 2024 comes with its own set of complexities. The relationship between Canada and China has been, to put it mildly, strained in recent years. Diplomatic tensions escalated significantly in 2018 following the arrest of Meng Wanzhou, a top executive at Chinese tech giant Huawei, in Canada at the request of the United States. Shortly after Meng's arrest, 2 Canadians, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, were detained in China in what was widely seen as retaliation. They were held for over 1,000 days on espionage charges, which Canada and its allies denounced as baseless. Their eventual release in 2021 did little to ease the diplomatic frost. This backdrop of political tension has created an environment of uncertainty for Canadians traveling to China. While tourism is still possible, Canadians may face increased scrutiny, visa difficulties, or even arbitrary detention. Beyond the diplomatic complexities, there are also concerns about surveillance and restrictions on personal freedoms in China. The Chinese government's vast surveillance apparatus, including facial recognition technology and internet censorship, can be unnerving for visitors accustomed to more open societies. It's also worth noting that China has strict laws and regulations, and even minor infractions can result in severe penalties. Canadians traveling to China need to be aware of these laws and ensure they comply with them at all times. So, while China's cultural and historical treasures are undeniably alluring, Canadians need to weigh these attractions against the very real risks and challenges posed by the current political climate. At number 8, Afghanistan, a country in turmoil. Our journey now takes us to a nation grappling with profound upheaval, Afghanistan. The images we've seen coming out of Afghanistan in recent years, the chaotic withdrawal of foreign forces, the swift takeover by the Taliban, the desperate pleas of those seeking to flee, paint a stark picture of a country in crisis. For Canadians, traveling to Afghanistan is simply out of the question. The Canadian government has issued the strongest possible travel advisory, urging citizens to avoid all travel to the country, and for good reason. The security situation in Afghanistan remains extremely volatile. The Taliban's grip on power has brought with it a resurgence of violence and instability. Targeted attacks, bombings, and armed clashes are a constant threat, particularly in Kabul, the capital city. Beyond the immediate security risks, the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan is dire. The country is facing a severe economic crisis, food shortages, and a collapsing healthcare system. Millions of Afghans are in desperate need of humanitarian assistance, a situation exacerbated by the Taliban's restrictive policies. For Canadians, providing consular assistance in Afghanistan is extremely difficult, if not impossible. The Canadian embassy in Kabul remains closed, and there's no guarantee of support for Canadians who find themselves in trouble. Given the extreme risks and the rapidly evolving situation on the ground, Afghanistan is a country that Canadians must avoid at all costs. The potential dangers are simply too great, and the consequences of traveling there could be dire. At number 9, Libya, a nation divided. We continue our exploration of countries facing significant challenges, this time turning our attention to North Africa and the nation of Libya. Once a relatively prosperous nation under the rule of Muammar Gaddafi, Libya has been mired in conflict and instability since the 2011 uprising that toppled his regime. For Canadians, traveling to Libya is fraught with danger. The Canadian government strongly advises against all travel to the country, citing the ongoing armed conflict, the threat of terrorism, and the high risk of kidnapping. Libya today is essentially a fractured nation, with rival governments vying for control and a patchwork of militias operating with impunity. This lack of central authority has created a security vacuum, making it extremely dangerous for foreigners, including Canadians. The threat of terrorism is also a major concern in Libya. Extremist groups, including ISIS, have gained a foothold in the country, carrying out attacks against civilians and security forces. Kidnapping for ransom is another serious risk, particularly for foreigners who are seen as valuable targets. The Canadian government's ability to provide consular assistance to Canadians in Libya is extremely limited. The Canadian embassy in Tripoli has been closed since 2014, and there's no guarantee of support for Canadians who find themselves in trouble. Given the volatile security situation, the threat of terrorism, and the lack of consular support, Libya is a country that Canadians should avoid at all costs. The risks are simply too high, and the potential consequences of traveling there are too grave. Number 10, Yemen, a humanitarian catastrophe. Our final stop takes us to the southern tip of the Arabian Peninsula, to a country ravaged by one of the world's worst humanitarian crises, Yemen. For nearly a decade, Yemen has been embroiled in a devastating civil war, pitting a Saudi-led coalition against Houthi rebels. The conflict has had a catastrophic impact on Yemen and its people. Millions have been displaced from their homes, and the country is facing widespread famine, disease, and a collapsing healthcare system. The United Nations has described the situation in Yemen as the world's worst humanitarian crisis. For Canadians, traveling to Yemen is simply out of the question. The Canadian government advises against all travel to the country, citing the extreme risks posed by the ongoing conflict, the threat of terrorism, and the high risk of kidnapping. The security situation in Yemen is extremely volatile. Airstrikes, shelling, and ground fighting are commonplace, particularly in the north of the country. Landmines and unexploded ordnance pose a significant threat to civilians, and there's a high risk of being caught in the crossfire. The humanitarian situation in Yemen is nothing short of dire. Millions are facing starvation, and access to clean water, sanitation, and healthcare is extremely limited. The COVID-19 pandemic has only exacerbated the crisis, overwhelming the country's already fragile healthcare system. Given the extreme dangers posed by the ongoing conflict, the humanitarian crisis, and the lack of consular support, Yemen is a country that Canadians must avoid at all costs. The risks are simply too great, and the potential consequences of traveling there are too dire. So there you have it, folks. Canadians might face significant challenges in 2024. From political instability and diplomatic tensions to ongoing conflicts and humanitarian crises, these destinations present serious risks for travelers. Remember, this isn't about living in fear or avoiding travel altogether. It's about being informed, assessing risks, and making responsible decisions. The world is full of incredible places to explore, but it's crucial to prioritize our safety and well-being. Always remember to check the latest travel advisories from the Canadian government and stay informed about the situation in your intended destination. Be prepared, be cautious, and most importantly, stay safe. See you in the next video.